will start recording and just introduce our speaker and the program tonight. So many, I'm sorry, I just have to keep something straight here. Many of us not only know Sharsheret, but are supporters and participants of this amazing organization. And for those who do not, for over 20 years, Sharsheret has provided help and improved the lives for Jewish women and families nationwide through personalized support and educational outreach, both in person and now, sorry, I lost my place. In person and now virtually, with genetic counseling, caregiver support, educational resources, and a variety of programs, many of which can be found on their incredible website. Tonight's guest speaker is Melissa Rosen, the Long Island Program Director of Training and Education at Sharsheret. Melissa holds a master's degree in Jewish communal service from Brandeis and has been working in the nonprofit sector for over 30 years. Her professional experience includes informal education and programming, advocacy, and community outreach. Melissa's work has allowed her to facilitate unique and lasting connections among organizations in the diverse American Jewish community. Melissa oversees community education throughout the country, training healthcare professionals and Sharsheret's volunteers. She also manages the Sharsheret community partnerships. Herself a two-time cancer survivor, she's passionate about the Jewish community and cancer support and advocacy. Melissa will address an important topic, creating a caring community, knowing the right thing to say and do. It is often assumed that providing support is instinctive and that we know how to give the best advice, but as we all truly know, that's not always the case. Melissa will explore the best ways to support a friend, a loved one, or community member facing not only breast cancer, but any illness with concrete practical tips, and also explore how communities as a whole can meet some of the needs of our members facing illness. We will also hear from our own Rachel Samuels-Rand, who will speak of her experiences, and then hopefully figure out what to do with the dough and the pink sprinkles, which was supplied by wonderful Zucker's Bakery in Plainview, who I promised I would give a plug because they were just so very nice to me, and Sue. Okay, so thank you for Melissa for joining us, especially filling in for Nancy. And I turn this over to you now.
Thank you so much for having Sharsheret and for being okay with the last minute switch. Okay, so tonight in about 20 minutes, I'm going to introduce you a little bit to Sharsheret, but also talk about practical ways to support someone who is facing a cancer diagnosis. You know, I'll be very honest, my bio said that that I'm a two-time cancer survivor, and this presentation actually came out of a personal experience I had. Just like Sandy said, offering support, we think it should be instinctive. I promise you it is not. People say ridiculous things to people who have cancer. And one of my experiences, the one that was sort of a final whatever to me, was before I started working at Sharsheret. My second cancer diagnosis was about a year before I started working at Sharsheret, and it's actually the reason I switched jobs. But I had to tell my current boss that I needed to step away for a bit because I had a cancer diagnosis. Now, work being as it is, sometimes you have a great relationship with your boss, sometimes you don't. And in this particular case, I didn't have a great relationship with my boss. I told her what was going on, and within seconds, she was bawling. I found myself having to comfort her when she was someone I worked with, but otherwise didn't say more than hello to. Her reaction was completely disproportionate to our relationship. And so I said, okay, so we really need to address the best way to do this. And the reality is that receiving a breast cancer diagnosis is overwhelming and isolating and frightening. Receiving any serious diagnosis is. And it's important to keep in mind that even though it may seem counterintuitive, breast cancer is not just a personal issue, it's actually a communal issue. And the Jewish community and members of the Jewish community can be an amazing source of comfort and support to anyone facing a difficult diagnosis. Like I said, I know from my own experiences from 2 different diagnoses how wonderful the community can be. Within a week, each time I had childcare, rides, meals, and more. I knew that I had good friends and that I was a valued member of the community. Yet recently, Sharsheret's been receiving calls from some women that we've helped, and they were concerned that people they know were upset with them. Of course, the reaction we had was, why? What could you possibly have done? Well, it turns out that when asked what they could do or what someone might be able to do to help them, they didn't have an answer. And those well-meaning souls were so frustrated they couldn't help. So again, it's possible that offering support isn't as instinctive as we believe. So let's explore some concrete ways. The first one, and we'll address one-on-one support, and then at the end, we'll go to community. But the first thing is say something. I have a friend who was diagnosed with breast cancer a few years back, and she confided in me. So many people had reached out to her and offered her words of comfort, but 2 of our close friends had not. And I said to her, well, of course, they must have spoken with your husband. No, they hadn't. She said to me, Melissa, I know I should not be wasting my valuable energy on this, but I'm not sure I can get past the hurt. You know, the thing is that cancer stirs difficult emotions in all of us, but it's never wise to ignore someone's diagnosis. It's perfectly okay to say, I don't know what to say, or simply, I'm thinking of you. I just want you to know I'm thinking of you. Of course, there are times you should not say something. Saying, I know just how you feel, or I have a friend who had that, is not relevant. Everybody's cancer is different. And in fact, breast cancer itself is actually 11 distinct diagnoses, each with their own treatment protocols and outcomes. And even if you're talking to someone who happened to have the exact same diagnosis as someone you know, or as you've dealt with, everybody reacts to treatment differently. So each person's cancer is uniquely their own. So how do you handle this? Well, you should follow her lead and validate her feelings. You know, she may want to talk specifically about things other than her cancer. Or maybe that's the time to share a little harmless gossip to distract her. Or you may find her limiting the cancer conversation to logistics, meals, surgeries, childcare. In that case, a great thing to do would be to help her organize. Yet again, she may want to talk about her diagnosis. You know, it all depends on the relationship you have with the person. If that's the case, let her vent her frustrations or share her fears. Be a good listening ear, but don't feel you need to solve her problems because you can't. Just being there, letting her speak is a beautiful gift. So that's 1, say something. 2, do something. Cancer treatment is debilitating and it can be very overwhelming. In fact, I'm missing the word. It gets more and more debilitating as it goes on. It's not like every 2 weeks when somebody has a treatment, they have the same level of debilitation. It gets more and more debilitating. So likely that person needs help. but please just don't ask them what you can do to help them. Doing that actually places the onus on the patient. And it's possible she really doesn't know what she needs. It's also incredibly difficult for some of us to ask for help, especially when we're used to being the one that does for others, whether it's family or friends or community members. So the best thing to do is to offer specifics. Say, I'm going to Target. Do you need toilet paper, milk? Can I pick up a magazine for you? Or say, I'd like to drop off dinner. Is Thursday at 6 okay? If you don't need it now, put it in the freezer. It's ready to be frozen. Or possibly saying, now that the world seems to be opening up a little bit, excuse me, I'm taking my kids bowling Sunday. Would your kids like to join? There are other things you can do that may require a bit more, but are so incredibly important. You know, one of the things that I found most helpful in my own experience was I had one friend accompany me to all my appointments. She had a bit of a medical background, sort of a medical background, but she was great at advocating for me. She took great notes. You know, oncology is sort of a foreign language to any of us. And being upset makes it even harder to process. So like I said, my friend took notes. I referred to those notes through my entire year of treatment. So if you know of someone that you could be of that service, who might feel comfortable with it, you can offer your services. But remember, whatever you offer, it has to be commensurate with the relationship you had prior to their diagnosis. So, you know, someone you see in synagogue and say hello to a couple times a month, you wouldn't offer that. But a friend you would offer that to, or, you know, someone you've known for years and years. You could also offer to be a conduit of information to friends and even community members. It's so nice to receive texts, you know, thinking of you, how are you doing? But it's actually kind of exhausting to need to respond to all of those well-meaning inquiries. So if there's one person who is sort of the funnel and gets that information out to everybody, that's very helpful. You also might offer to coordinate meals. There are many great websites to do this. Take Them a Meal, Meal Train. Some of them actually even allow you to post updates on that person's progress. So-and-so got through her surgery really well. She's recovering at home, but because she's recovering, we could use a couple of extra meals. They could use a couple of extra meals this week, or they would love to have a teenage volunteer offer homework help over Zoom or something like that. So that's 1, say something. 2, do something. 3, you might choose to support the cause. You could walk in a breast cancer race in their honor. If the person you know is blogging about her experience, be sure to read it. For some people, that's very therapeutic. You could even make an appropriate donation in her honor, or donate your hair to an organization that creates wigs for people in chemotherapy. These are only a few of so many things that can be done to support someone facing cancer. I'm actually going to send, after my part of the evening is done, to Sandy a PDF we have that lists tens and tens and tens of ways, specific things you might be able to do. And I will hope that you can distribute it as appropriate. And then we can discuss more if you have any questions afterward. But whatever you choose to do, however you choose to offer support, the most important thing to do is to let the person facing cancer set the tone. Ask, but don't be offended if she doesn't accept. She may have all the meals she needs, or be too tired to go out for coffee, or maybe immunocompromised and not able to enjoy a visit. Inquire, but don't be offended if she doesn't respond. In fact, ending a card or an email or a text message with the phrase, No need to respond. Just wanted you to know I was thinking of you is a huge gift in and of itself. And also let them know that Sharsheret is there for them. You know, a good deal of the women we work with, their first point of contact with Sharsheret was through a friend or family member. Someone else who called to get information for that person while they were wading through the diagnostic process. You know, I said I wanted to share just a little bit of about Sharsheret tonight. We offer free, confidential, and individualized psychosocial support, emotional support for anyone impacted by breast or ovarian cancer. Anyone means not just the patient, but the caregivers, the children, the friends, or who is living with a higher diagnostic risk because of a strong family history or a mutation in a BRCA or similar gene. All of this is available to anyone. We're easy to access. You know, I'll put our website in there, but people can just email or call, and we're happy to help in any way, whether it's requesting a busy box for someone, for a family that's dealing with cancer while raising young kids. The kids get this huge box of age and interest appropriate toys, and the adults in the household get a packet of information about how to talk about cancer in a developmentally appropriate way. Or a survivorship kit, a best face forward kit to help deal with the cosmetic side effects of treatment, subsidies to purchase a wig or to use a cold cap that reduces hair loss during chemotherapy, just talking to a social worker, and so many more things. And you know, we are always there. Okay, so you know, we talked about a little bit in my few minutes left. I want to talk about community for a second, because we talked about sort of one-on-one support, but I want to talk about how the community as a whole can create a community of support, encourage a community of comfort. You know, let me start by sharing an interesting fact. Study after study has actually proven that patients whose non-medical needs are met have better medical outcomes. Patients whose non-medical needs are met have better medical outcomes. That may seem counterintuitive, but it's true. They get through treatment with fewer complications. They may live longer. They don't just survive, but they thrive. So what are non-medical needs? I mean, obviously we think about things like finances and childcare. It could also simply be the ability to not worry about details such as rides to treatment or meals for family. But it also may be addressing someone's cultural or religious needs, perhaps helping prepare for Passover or Shavuot, or ensuring they're able to use the mikveh if they want to, despite their unique circumstances, or prepare for Shabbat, get to synagogue if they want, whatever it is. So what can the community as a whole do to help members meet their non-medical needs? Well, you're already doing the first one, which is to educate. The synagogue can offer awareness programs to not only train and support caregivers, but to educate about genetics and hereditary cancers and being proactive about health. They can offer programs to give men and women the tools they need to be proactive, to feel empowered to take care of themselves. Providing this type of education sets a particular tone in the community, and it prioritizes self-care. The second thing, respect. Every patient has a right to decide how much information to disclose and who to share it with. Thankfully, the great majority of rabbis and clergy make themselves available and are welcoming to congregants in need. In fact, at Sharsheret, we actually encourage women to consider their rabbi as part of their treatment team. That person can offer spiritual support. Hold on, I just came out of the meeting, but I'm back. Did you lose my voice? No, fine, great. But it's important to keep in mind that if a patient shares a diagnosis with the rabbi, it's perfectly acceptable to ask the rabbi not to share with anyone, not the synagogue president, not the rabbi's spouse, no one. A patient's also allowed to say, it's okay to share with the Bikor Cholim committee, but please, nobody else. Or a patient may choose to be open about their diagnosis. I also want to point out that it's perfectly acceptable for someone to change their minds. Perhaps they've been open, but their status has changed. Maybe cancer has recurred or something similar. People have a lot of reasons as to how they decide to share or not share their diagnosis. They may want to share in the knowledge and experience of community members who've been where they are, or they may want to be private for the sake of their kids. There are so many factors that go into disclosure decisions, so please respect those decisions. And the third thing that a community as a whole can do is support. There are practical things that congregations, as opposed to people, can do to create a community of care. If the woman is willing and open about her diagnosis, a congregation can send email updates about her status. Not only does this take the burden of an exhausted patient from responding to so many inquiries, but it keeps community members updated, and likely they want to be. A congregation can also send out specific needs, such as requests for meals or play dates or rides, a trip to the market. For congregants who want to maintain some level of privacy, there are still things that can be done. Many congregations have groups that say Tehillim or active Bikor Cholim committees to visit those facing illness. Obviously, volunteers with these synagogue groups are trained to know what's confidential. Even for a patient who wants to maintain complete privacy, which to reaffirm is perfectly appropriate, there are things that can be done. Some congregations have actually set up special committees that allow a congregant who's ill to receive meals or have errands run. The request is public, but the recipients are only known by one or two people. So to close, I really want to reiterate that a cancer diagnosis is so overwhelming and so challenging. Being reminded that a person is still an important and integral part of the community is really invaluable. A cancer diagnosis is a life-changing one. The way the Jewish community comes together to respect and support a family may well determine that family's ongoing commitment to the community, to Judaism, even to God. So be there for them. Be there for them. The last point I want to make before I open to questions is remember, if you are caregiving, to care for yourself. Sharsheret has a caregivers program you can call, get helpful hints, vent if you need to, because if you know a person well who's been diagnosed, their diagnosis will impact you as a caregiver as well. So it's important to have a support system of your own. Okay, before I talk for a moment or two about Hala, does anybody have any questions about anything, about Sharsheret, about caregiving, about cancer, anything? You can unmute yourself, you can write it in the chat box, whatever you'd like. All right.
So I'll just ask while everyone's getting together, do you find, are you more active in the Long Island, New York area than across the country, or are you active across the whole country?
We're active across the whole country, but obviously we have pockets of deep activity and involvement, and Long Island is one of those. So I'm not part of the Long Island team, but we have two members of our Long Island team that are part of the greater Sharsheret team. We literally have members across the country, Illinois, Atlanta, Florida, California, and continually growing. And we have partners, community partners across the country as well.
I have a question.
Oh, great.
Okay, I'm a physician, I'm a gynecologist. And unfortunately, I've told way, way, way too many women that their biopsies are abnormal and been the first point of contact. And it has not gotten easier over 30 years to make that phone call. And the reaction of people when I tell them is so varied, from like, oh, okay, I'll make the appointment with the oncologist, to immediately, sobbing hysterically on the phone. And as somebody who's received that diagnosis twice, what is there, how was your experience getting the diagnosis, and how would you have wanted it different or the same? What was good, what was bad about getting that phone call? And any suggestions from your personal experience about
Great
that?
question. Nobody's ever asked me that in almost a decade of working at Sharsheret. Two very different experiences, two different doctors. My first diagnosis was actually Hodgkin's lymphoma. And interestingly, it was my treatment for Hodgkin's that led to the breast cancer, which isn't surprising to you, Hildy. And it was an afterthought. I was diagnosed with a children's disease. I had hand, foot, and mouth, whatever the formal title for that kid's disease is. And it's dangerous for pregnant women. And so I called and I used to teach in a mommy and me. So I called my doctor and said, can I teach this? And she said, no, and adults don't get this. So come, let me see you. And she did a full exam and everything was fine. I literally had one foot out the door. I said, oh, by the way, as long as I'm here, can you feel this for me? And she sent me right to a doctor, an ENT who did an exam, and it was right before the high holidays. And he said, you need to have an MRI or a CAT scan, I think it was, immediately. I know Rosh Hashanah starts tomorrow. I don't care, kind of culturally insensitive. Rosh Hashanah starts tomorrow. I don't care if that's when they can get you in. You are not going to be in synagogue. You are going to be at radiology. And he kept saying, you need to get this done to rule out cancer, but I'm telling you, you have cancer. You need to get this done to rule that out, but here are the reasons you have cancer. So that was kind of a culturally and emotionally insensitive way to go about doing it. The second one was actually a shock because I was getting a baseline MRI so they could compare it to future ones. I had just had a clean mammogram, so I wasn't expecting anything. And the call was very shocking. My breast surgeon was out of town, so the doctor called, her partner called very thoughtfully saying she knew I wouldn't want to wait. So and shared, she was sorry, but this is where we were and here were next steps. So that was definitely a better experience. But I have to tell you, I'm not sure from an emotional perspective, like I could tell you the second one was a better experience, but I don't think emotionally it really made a difference. Hearing you have cancer is the same, whether somebody's kind about it or not. I mean, other people I'm sure would feel the same way. But looking back now, that the cultural insensitivity of the first one was particularly difficult. He probably thought it was fine because he was Jewish himself. He was trying to make a point. It just wasn't a great way to make a point. Interesting.
I had a very negative experience when I first diagnosed with Hodgkin's, because I had a biopsy, they couldn't tell what it was, and then they had to have a biopsy in the OR. So the surgeon, I went to see him to get the diagnosis, and he said the pathology report's not back yet. I'm sorry. So I said, I have to get to the office. I said, I'll call you at the end of the day. So as I'm in the waiting room, I'm literally walking out the door. And the receptionist said, oh, doctor, pathology, they have the pathology. So I get on the phone, and the woman on the phone she thought she was speaking to the surgeon. She goes, well, it's cancer. Oh. And that's how, with a waiting room full of people, that's how I found out. And I ended up spending the next several minutes comforting her because she felt so bad. I was like, it's okay, I'd have to know anyhow, but that definitely impacted the way I told people about diagnosis after that. You don't do it in a packed waiting room, through a glass
Don't do
door.
it in a packed waiting room. You have to, listen, people know it's coming. You could say, listen, this was unexpected, or however you start, however gentle you are, people know what's coming.
Right.
But there are certain ways that are particularly inappropriate, and what you describe is one of those ways.
It was a learning experience for me,
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions? Thank you for sharing that. Okay, I'm going to just talk for 2 minutes about Hala, and if there are any other questions afterward, we can ask again. I wanted to share one thing about Hala. My oncologist actually started something with one of his patients' spouses called the Hala Fund, and every Friday at the hospital he admits to, it's stopped with COVID, but it'll resume hopefully soon, delivers a Hala to every single one of his patients who is in the hospital, whether they're Jewish or not, because there is something nourishing and the expression bread of life, Hala, or that's what it is. So Hala is beautiful. You are going to take the Hala you make tonight. It's Tuesday, so probably if you can wait until Shabbat, freeze it and bring it back out and warm it up on Friday. But I'm going to make a suggestion. You're going to have a pink challah if you choose to put sprinkles on it. Be sure to invite somebody to share a meal with you. With any luck, it'll be warm. You could even do it outside. And when they say to you, why in the world is your challah pink? You could start to spread awareness. If you're not able to share a meal because of COVID or whatever, consider making two smaller challahs and bring one of those challahs to someone who is going through a difficult time right now. And what a beautiful gift that would be. So thank you so much. Again, I put my email in the chat box, but I'll do it one more time. If anybody has any questions at all that come up, and I'll give you the Sharsheret website as well, please don't hesitate to reach out. It would be my pleasure to answer any questions, connect you to any resources for anyone you know, and help in any way possible. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Melissa. Not
Thank you.
only for talk, but again, for filling in for Nancy.
Of course, my
Such
pleasure.
short notice.
My pleasure.
Okay.
All right, have a great night and
Okay.
enjoy challah making.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so everybody else, I might have been a little bit of miscommunication here, but I thought they were going to be doing the challah braiding part of our evening. Clearly they're not. So many of us have some fabulous dough, which I'll confess I did taste. We can either play around, I see that they did send resources and we could wing our way through, or like Sherry's doing, we could each get a glass of wine and just hang out and talk, which would be my vote, but I don't want to bias anyone.
Well, if we don't do,
I'm with Sherry.
Everybody go to Sherry's house.
can we freeze this dough? Can we, if we don't do, can we freeze this and bring it out on Friday?
So I would say that yes, I think that it can be frozen and then brought out again, or braided and then brought out. However it is you would do with your own dough. I think that's safe.
But wait, it went through the first rise or whatever? Like at what phase of
Yeah,
dough?
it's bigger already.
It's big.
It did. I know.
I think
I want to know it feels like a breast.
Barbara would say that. And I was just, Sandy, should we hear from Rachel before we do that?
yeah.
Absolutely, we should. And I'm sorry, Rachel, that we didn't get that part before Melissa left, because We should have shared your story with her as well, but
That's okay. I
but
mean,
yes.
I know most people here, so it's not so difficult. You know, which is a nice change of pace. In the past, I've spoken at Chabad events and whatever, and it's all these people I don't know. But here, you kind of went through it with me, so that's a comforting thing. So I'm gonna shorten my shtick a little bit because in the interest of time and wine, etc. But
She does know us very well.
yes. So, I mean, I have to say, growing up at Shelter Rock, I always had a community. I didn't have to really worry about other organizations, etc. When I did first get, for those who don't know me, I'm Rachel, by the way. And I'm here today to talk about my BRCA1 diagnosis, which is a mutation that puts you at higher risk for breast cancer. And it's something that comes from either your mother or your father. Happened to come from my father, so it didn't come from my mom. I know she likes to make sure she knows it didn't come from her. But you know, Shelter Rock has been with me through when I got my first period. They threw me a huge party. When my mom went through menopause, we got a party. Through breakups, through high school grievances. When I fainted at my wedding, all of the Shelter Rock doctors were there to get me back on the dance floor. It's they've been with me through it all. So really, through this journey, I've been lucky enough to not need Sharsheret as much, but let alone I needed them more than I thought I did. And they really shed a lot of light on a really unfortunate situation. When I found out I was BRCA1 positive, it's very upsetting. I think that one thing I would suggest to not say to one who's BRCA positive is that they're so lucky that because at the moment you don't feel so lucky. So that would be my first word of advice for someone who has a BRCA1 diagnosis. Now, when I first approached Sharsheret, it was actually to run the New York City Marathon with them in 2019. And that was more, and I spoke to Ellen, who's one of the directors at Sharsheret, and I told her why I wanted to run because I had the BRCA1 diagnosis. And she said, I just want to pause for a minute. I'm taking off my Team Sharsheret hat. I'm putting on my social worker hat. How could we help you during this time? And I was really in awe because in my head, I wasn't really emotionally ready to talk about it so much. I was kind of like, I just want to run so I could feel like I'm doing something positive. But it got me more excited to run the marathon. Now, looking forward to 2020, which we all know turned out to be such a fun year. I was supposed to get married that November, and then my now husband and I decided I would get a double mastectomy preventatively the next year. Things were looking good, and then COVID hit. And I remember calling my mom being like, I cannot do intense surveillance for another year. I was like, I'm going crazy. And I said, I need to do this and I need to do it now. So once elective surgeries were put back into play during COVID, in June 2020, I went in for a preventative double mastectomy, which was in the height of COVID. And I have to say, having Sharsheret there was really important for me at the time because at the time we weren't seeing people. I was talking to social workers. I connected with other people who had the same diagnosis as me. And I really needed that connection. And I also, as much as it was great to talk to people I knew, it was also great to talk to people outside of my community as well. Just as a non-judgmental zone, someone who didn't know me. And I actually made really good friends through Sharsheret out of the experience. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing a double mastectomy during a pandemic, but I have to say Sharsheret was really there for me through it all. Not even just for emotional advice, but also what's the best mastectomy pillow to get, or what's the best, and Jenny, thank you for that. What size should your nipple be after surgery, or et cetera. They were there for all of those nitty gritty questions, and I appreciated it. Just to get to the part where the point of the what she was talking about, what to say and what not to say. Something I remember a friend of mine said to me was, when I told her I had BRCA1, I said, she goes, oh, I know exactly how you feel. I had to get a mole removed because they thought maybe it was cancerous. And I was like, uh-huh. Like, I was like, that's, I want to feel empathetic for you, but at the same time, you don't feel like you're understood. Another tip, not asking why. I think a lot of people were like to me, why are you getting a double mastectomy? You're in your 20s, you're young and whatever. But that, when people ask me, made my reasoning for getting a mastectomy feel invalid. So really not asking why, because for me, that was what kept me sane, knowing I was getting a mastectomy and knowing that I was doing something about it. And if anything, similar to what her name was, Melissa, right? Melissa. Melissa was like, let their words guide you. Because I think that it really depends on the person. I mean, as you know, I'm your mother's daughter. Like, I could talk about my insides and outsides from here to Mars and like be okay with it. But some women are not so okay with it. So you really have to take their lead when it comes to how much they want information they want to offer. And also keep checking in. I think that some of the hardest times I had after my surgery weren't actually directly after the surgery, but the weeks after. So being able to send a text saying, just thinking of you, hope you're okay. Not just directly after the surgery, but the weeks after. I also happen to have some complications with my surgery. So it was like an ongoing, but it was totally fine in the end. But those little things really meant the world. And I have to say again, I'm very lucky to have Shelter Rock and the community there, because I can name so many of you guys who were there for me during my experience. And I appreciate it so much. But I have to say, Sharsheret really was there for me, and I appreciate all that they did. So hopefully you took something from some of my words of wisdom. And does anyone have any questions? Sorry, the teacher in me has to ask that. You don't have to have any. It's okay.
I just wanted to thank you, Rachel, because you really spoke beautifully. And I really appreciated what Hildy said. Unfortunately, many of you know that I've been through a number of different family members of myself, issues with cancer. And I wish there was a Sharsheret for lymphoma. Like, oh my God, like, I wish that they had that as well. And a lot of the things, I've gone through the same thing, having had a mastectomy, and it was more it wasn't, I didn't have to have it. I had choices. And I still get asked why. Like, I'll go to a doctor and they'll say, well, why'd you do that? Like, well, I have a family history. Like, I don't want to have to explain that every time. Right. And so I really respect that what you said that. And I also think the being there for people doesn't have to, it should be in their own place. And I really valued everything she said about that. So I think that was a very, again, I think we should start a new organization for Hildy and me.
Thanks, Judy. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
Of course. Thank you guys. Okay. You guys were all there for me throughout it all. So I really have Shelter Rock to thank.
Again, thank you very much for sharing your words. And I think all of, I hope that we all take away, both yours and Melissa's advice and words of wisdom, and treat everyone, just be nice to people.
Just be nice.
Just be nice. And I love the expression, like, meet them where they are. So I think you both spoke to that as well.
Thank you.
So,
yeah.
Okay, unless anyone has anything else.
I have a question from somebody who never, ever, ever bakes and is very afraid of meat.
I knew it was going to be that.
Like, what do I do with this thing?
Okay, I'm with Hildy on that.
I've never baked challah. I rely on the goodness of strangers and my friends, like Barbara, who makes delicious challah. So it's very intimidating to me. So all you have to do is braid it and then you let it sit for an hour? Is that?
So I do have, you know, as I say, I will confess that there was a miscommunication. I do have some instructions that I will email to everyone. And yes, I would put it in the refrigerator now. Or if you know what you're doing, braid it and put it in the refrigerator, and then the timing as far as you know, how long to let it rise and bake and everything. I will send you all of that.
Great.
Please do.
Thank
I definitely need that.
Sandy,
So
what
I
if, what if we each take a picture of whatever our challah turns out to be,
Ah,
all right? And send it to Sandy.
so
And then we
I
can-
will ask, I feel like you're not paying for the challah, but I will ask that we did set an $18 donation for this wonderful event, challah included, or at least dough included. And a part of that will go to Sharsheret. So if everyone could send a check into Shelter Rock to Sisterhood, then we will take care of a donation to them. So
And don't forget your sprinkles.
I thank you all very much, and happy baking.
Thank
Hildy.
you.
There's,
Thank
there,
you.
there are YouTube videos that can show you how to do it really easily. That's how I learned. I
Right,
just
but
went on YouTube.
That's good.
That's a
Right.
good,
Yeah,
that's
on
good.
YouTube and you make 3 lines.
No, I know how
and-
to braid. I just like, what do you?
And don't be afraid of the dough. You're in charge of the dough. The dough tries to be in charge of you.
Oh, my God.
Thank you.
That's great advice. We got a lot of good advice tonight, but I didn't expect that one.
Well, I was afraid of the dough at first.
This dough already went through its first rise, right?
Right.
I think it's risen, and I think
Baking is waiting for retirement.
Do it,
That's
let it
my-
rise again.
That's what I'm gonna do.
What'd you say? What'd you say, Iris?
I will learn how to bake in retirement. Now it's easy to buy.
But you still got this. You can't waste this.
Yeah, how long you think it'll last?
well, you can freeze it. You
Till
can freeze
next Passover.
right.
Until you throw it out.
But wait, this is bigger than you dropped it off. So is
I
it
know,
already
I know.
started its thing?
started to rise.
Oh, so you can
Yeah.
divide it
Right,
up and
so-
braid it, and then you're ready to bake it. You don't have to keep like waiting for it to rise. It's ready.
Okay, so
If we
how
braid it
long do
tonight,
you bake it for and what temperature?
right?
If you have a
You put
convection
egg on
oven,
top?
400 for 30 minutes.
Egg?
How
And a
long?
regular oven?
Regular oven.
You can do 400. You might have to go a little longer.
How many
I
Jewish?
can't
women
believe I'm
does it
telling
take
all
to
you
braid a
ladies how to
challah?
do this, and I was like one of the last ones to become Jewish.
Truly our savior, Jane.
So,
Wait a minute, Ruth Zellman makes challah all the time.
Barbara
Yes,
does
Ruth,
too.
that's
Why is
right.
Ruth not telling us how to do
Ruth,
this?
chime in here.
She thinks we're
400
good
for how long?
She's muted.
Unmute
You
yourself.
did.
I know, I gotta unmute. I make challah, but I'm not so good at this. I bake it at 350, but
Me too.
Yeah.
That's right. But I'm sure it works at 400. I guess everyone's oven is different, but I do it at 350, and I do one challah at a time for 25 minutes. And
Same.
yes,
Too.
someone asked if they put egg wash on it, and the answer is yes, you do. You just take an egg and then you just brush it on. If you don't have a brush, you can take a little bit of a paper towel, dip it in, and then
Not
Um,
just the egg yolk, the whole egg. You just
the whole.
No,
No,
you can
and
Just the white.
I use
That-
the egg.
I do everything. I do it together, and like you make a scrambled egg and then you just coat it. The other thing is that I would say when you braid it, I would then let it rise. I would cover it with a dish towel, not too heavy, and I would let it rise for a little while.
right.
And then I would bake it.
Yep.
So
That's
you
what I do.
definitely have to, after you braid it and you play, you're handling it, I would say to do that.
Yeah.
And that's.
okay.
But this
And
is-
if
this
you
is
don't
like-
have the pink sprinkles, want to make it real fun, put the everything bagel on top.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, yeah.
That's
At what point
delicious.
you put that on? When you grate it?
No, when you put
On
the
the egg wash,
You
right?
can do it
Put the
when you
egg
grate
wash.
it too. So it's inside.
You
Right,
put the
that's-
egg wash over the sprinkles or under the sprinkles?
I think
No, the
under
egg
so
wash
that-
goes first.
The
Egg wash
first,
is
then
like
the
glue,
sprinkles.
I think, right?
Yeah,
Yes,
egg wash goes first, then you put whatever you want on top.
Okay,
So one time I bought one of those challahs that are frozen, and all you have to do is put it out and let it rise for an hour. So I was running out of the house. I said to Neil, my husband, can you just put a towel over it? I come home and he went into the closet. He got the kosher Pesach, like happy Passover thing, and he put it on the challah.
Oh, God.
so funny.
That's very
I'm
funny.
gonna say good night, everybody. It was
Oh,
nice to
good
see
night. It's so
everybody.
nice to see everybody.
Yes.
This is
It was a great,
Good night.
program. Thank you,
Thank you
Rachel.
all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for being here.
yes, Rachel, thank you. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Sandy.
Good
Be
night,
well,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you.
Night.